But don't just take Israel's word for it. Hamas put this in writing. In the final days of last year, Hamas released this manifesto, very impressive one. This document, a copy of which was sent to all of your missions this morning, removes all doubt about Hamas's real intentions. They wrote it. It wasn't us. In this document, it said very clearly, it rejects disarmament, it rejects giving up political power, it denies the atrocities of October 7th, it justifies and glorifies its mass murder. Hamas even boasts about its strategy and diplomacy. In its own words, it calls one of the achievements of October 7th the collapse, and I quote, of Israel's image as a Western democracy. That tells you everything. This is not the language of peace, even when dressed up as diplomacy. It is a roadmap for future violence.
80 years after the end of the Second World War, the core principles upon which the United Nations were founded remain as critical as ever. The right of peoples to self-determination, the prohibition on the acquisition of territory by threat or use of force, and the rule of international law as the guarantor of the rights of individuals, regardless of race, religion, or nationality, and of nations, large and small. Those principles are the expression of the wisdom finally acquired by humanity following a devastating war, where peoples around the globe endured and witnessed aggression, genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes on a scale that altered the course of history and led to the founding of these United Nations to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war and to ensure international peace and security. It is these very principles that are at stake and under threat in Palestine. Asserting them there is upholding them everywhere. Abandoning them there is jeopardizing them everywhere. Mr. President, we welcome the ceasefire agreement reached last year under President Trump's plan, and we commend the personal engagement of President Trump and the U.S. administration, as well as the tireless efforts of the mediators who have worked to implement it. We supported the ceasefire in good faith, even in the face of repeated breaches, with at least 500 Palestinians killed since the ceasefire came into effect, with many more wounded and ongoing destruction by the occupying power, and while life-saving assistance, including shelter, continues to be obstructed in the depths of this harsh winter. We support the plan because it offered an immediate path toward ending the killing and suffering, the famine, and unprecedented humanitarian catastrophe inflicted on the Palestinian people in Gaza. While we recognize that thousands of lives have been saved by the ceasefire, these goals are yet to be fully achieved. We welcome the completion of the release of all Israeli hostages and prisoners alive and deceased, including the recovery of the remains of the last Israeli body 2 days ago. We had repeatedly said that only a ceasefire could allow for this to happen. Yet, we must ask, what about the countless Palestinian families whose loved ones have been killed, with thousands of bodies still crushed and buried under rubble, yet to be found, yet to be identified, and to be given dignified burial? Families who waited for the return of thousands denied, tortured, humiliated, starved, raped, or missing, raped or missing. What of the entire families obliterated from existence, or the survivors of genocide left with grave injuries and amputations, who will carry the devastation with them for all their lives? What of the trauma and loss of an entire people? The suffering of the Palestinian people, civilian men, women, and children, must be ended with equal urgency. Healing, recovery, and justice are indispensable and a right for all. Full implementation of Phase 1 obligations, including an immediate end to the killing and unrestricted humanitarian access across the Gaza Strip, is essential. These are not new demands. They are the repeated calls of this Council and constitute obligations under international law. Moreover, Israel must end its ongoing war against humanitarian actors, including UNRWA and vital NGOs, whose safety and ability to operate have been repeatedly undermined. The destruction of UNRWA facilities, including the seizure and destruction of its headquarters in occupied East Jerusalem, which was also set ablaze, and the targeting of humanitarian personnel, and now the attempt to ban and expel recognized and respected NGOs operating on Palestinian territory, demonstrate total contempt for the very mechanisms established to protect and assist civilians. It is an attack on the United Nations by one of its members in ways we had never witnessed before. The advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice on Israel's humanitarian obligations must be fully respected. But instead of compliance, we have witnessed continued obstruction to aid delivery, continued violations of the Charter and Convention on the Privileges and Immunities of the United Nations, and continued grave breaches of international humanitarian law by the occupying power. In this regard, we call the letters of the Secretary General to the Security Council, to you and General Assembly, including that in light of the gravity of the Israeli government's actions, and I quote, a situation may exist in which a difference has arisen between the United Nations and the State of Israel regarding, among other things, the interpretation or application of the General Convention. End of quotation of the letter of the. Furthermore, we are obliged to underscore yet again, Israel is not the sovereign in the Palestinian territory. This illegal occupation has no rights whatsoever in occupied Palestine, including in Jerusalem. Mr. President, the ceasefire's permanence and success requires that Israel cease trying to dictate the future of Gaza and to fully withdraw from the territory. Gaza is an integral part of the Palestinian territory. I repeat, Gaza is an integral part of the Palestinian territory. It belongs to the Palestinian people, nobody else, and any transitional arrangements must fully respect our people's rights and our sovereignty over the occupied Palestinian territory. The Gaza Strip must be reunited with the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, without delay. And our people's right to self-determination and independent statehood, enshrined in the principles and purposes of the UN Charter, which I began with, and in numerous resolutions of the Security Council, General Assembly, ICJ rulings, peremptory norms of international law, cannot be disposed of. Israel has to abandon its plans to forcibly displace and replace our people across occupied Palestine. In the West Bank, Israeli military attacks and settler terrorism continue unabated, systematically driving Palestinians from their homes. Settlements continue to be advanced, all tools of rampant annexation. In this regard, we warn of the dangerous Israeli escalation against Palestinian cities, villages, and refugee camps in the West Bank, including the implementation of the so-called E1 settlement project. This must be stopped. The last families in Ras Ain al-Auja have been forced from their land, leaving no Palestinian presence in what was once a thriving community. This was the largest shepherding community in the southern Jordan Valley and the last to survive Israelis' ethnic cleansing in the area. United Nations reporting has now documented a record level of West Bank displacement in the last 2 years. Around 40,000 Palestinians violently and forcefully transferred from their homes, the highest figure ever since 1967. Despite the long-standing demands by the international community, including the Security Council for decades, for a halt to such illegal colonial practices, Israel persists with its impunity, entrenching its illegal occupation of our land and people every single day. This must be stopped. Mr. President, these events are not isolated. They are part of a sustained pattern that threatens not only the Palestinian people, but the foundational principles of this organization. This cannot be ignored. Yet, we still see a chance for peace. I repeat, yet we still see a chance for peace. A real historical opportunity to end the occupation, to realize Palestinian rights, to achieve just and lasting peace in accordance with international law and UN resolutions. The Palestinian Authority is working in impossible circumstances to uphold its responsibilities. It is working to retrieve the bodies of Palestinians, to restore education, to revive the health sector, to provide shelter and assistance, to reopen the Rafah crossing in both directions, to prepare for recovery and reconstruction. It has persisted in its decision to embark on a peaceful path to freedom and has not deviated from it. It has conducted difficult reforms while being undermined politically and financially. It has adopted the principle of one state, one government, one law, and one weapon. Palestine is a reliable partner for peace, if peace is the objective. Palestine is a reliable partner for peace, if peace is the objective. The whole world can testify to that. But the Israeli government's objective is not peace, it is domination. Netanyahu yet again bragged that he will never allow a Palestinian state to emerge. He went further, reaffirming Israel will retain control from the river to the sea, promising eternal occupation, a delusional idea that will continue depriving our region of the prospects and promise of peace. Mr. President, the Palestinian people have an inalienable right to self-determination, including the right to the independence of their state. Any implementation of peace plans must be uphold this right fully and unequivocally, and must preserve the unity and territorial integrity of the West Bank, including East Jerusalem and the Gaza Strip. There must be no administrative or legal, or I should rather say illegal, measures that entrench division and occupation instead of bringing an end to them. Mr. President, the best way to consolidate the ceasefire is to move towards a just peace. This requires the mobilization of the international community as a whole, in charting a clear path away from occupation and war towards shared peace, security, and prosperity as foreseen by the New York Declaration and supported overwhelmingly by the member states of these United Nations. We must all work together to advance these noble objectives. We welcomed the launch of Phase 2 of the ceasefire agreement and the establishment of transitional bodies to help administer Gaza in the transitional period ahead of reunifying the West Bank and Gaza Strip under the Palestinian Authority as stated by this Council. Palestine must be central to and fully represented in any processes that determines its future. We reiterate our readiness to work with the United States and regional and international partners to ensure respect for the ceasefire agreement in line with international law. Our people are waiting for the recovery and rebuilding promised to them after so much pain and loss inflicted on them. We cannot let them down. Palestine needs a just peace more than any other country because it suffers most in its absence. It is seeking a peaceful path to freedom. We are seeking a peaceful path to freedom. It should be encouraged and supported, not undermined. We want our rights, the rights accorded to all nations, nothing more, but also nothing less and nothing else. I repeat, we want our rights, the rights accorded to all nations, nothing more, but also nothing less and nothing else. Free Palestine, peace in the Middle East, and I thank you very much, Mr. President.
I thank the permanent observer of the Observer State of Palestine for his statement. I'll now give the floor to the representative of Israel.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I would like to thank the briefer and welcome the ministers who joined us today, and the new members of the Security Council. Mr. President, from the first day of the war in Gaza, Israel has been clear before this council about its goals. We had two goals: every hostage home, Hamas disarmed. With the return of Ran Gvili, I can finally say that the first goal has been achieved. Every hostage been brought home. What many believed was impossible is now a fact. We said we would bring them home, all of them, no matter how long it took. Now, for the first time since 2014, there is not a single Israeli hostage held in Gaza. This achievement was secured by the brave soldiers of the Israeli Defense Forces, young men and women who stepped forward with incredible determination, resolve, and courage. They defended our people. They brought our hostages home. They did so under fire, under pressure, and under relentless scrutiny, including from within this very chamber. Israel owes them a profound debt. The world owes them one as well. This effort was also driven and sustained by the leadership of the United States. The peace framework advanced by President Donald Trump and his administration created a path forward. Today, for the first time, 843 days, I sit in this chamber without the yellow hostage pin on my lapel. Everyone in Israel wore it until yesterday. This is a moment of deep national significance for Israel. This moment also carries a message far beyond Israel. Western liberal democracies do not cave to terrorists. They do not reward mass murder. They do not trade their values for silence. The message is clear for every terrorist organization watching us. Kidnapping civilians does not bring legitimacy. Violence does not deliver political gains. Terror does not win. Israel now advances its second goal with the same determination and clarity. Hamas must be disarmed. The next steps are grounded in phase 2 of the peace plan, supported by Israel, key international players and partners, and this Security Council. Phase 2 is written. It is structured. It provides for the establishment of a responsible governing framework for Gaza. There are positive signs. However, one obstacle remains: Hamas disarmament. The choice now rests with Hamas. Acceptance of full disarmament enables progress. Refusal places full responsibility on Hamas for the consequences. Clarity is essential about what disarmament actually means. Disarmament does not mean staged handovers for cameras. It does not mean weapons hidden underground while promises are made above ground. There is no real disarmament until Hamas's military infrastructure is dismantled. That includes weapons, command centers, and terror tunnels. No economic rebuilding can take place while Hamas remains armed. No civilian future can exist while a terrorist army controls Gaza. A genocidal terrorist organization should not have any weapons. Hamas understands this reality. That is why it delays, that is why it deceives. But don't just take Israel's word for it. Hamas put this in writing. In the final days of last year, Hamas released this manifesto. Very impressive one. This document, a copy of which was sent to all of your missions this morning, removes all doubt about Hamas's real intentions. They wrote it. It wasn't us. In this document, it said very clearly, it rejects disarmament. It rejects giving up political power. It denies the atrocities of October 7th. It justifies and glorifies its mass murder. Hamas even boasts about its strategy and diplomacy. In its own words, it calls one of the achievements of October 7th the collapse, and I quote, of Israel's image as a Western democracy. That tells you everything. This is not the language of peace, even when dressed up as diplomacy. It is a roadmap for future violence. Do not fall into Hamas's playbook. Do not let its propaganda write your talking points. Hamas still remains heavily armed. Let me show you the numbers. It still holds thousands of rockets, anti-tank missiles, and tens of thousands of Kalashnikov rifles. In total, Hamas still holds roughly 60,000 assault rifles. These weapons are used not only against us, against Israel, but against Gazans who oppose Hamas rule. This is not a movement preparing for peace. This is a terrorist army preparing for its next war. Israel has fully implemented phase 1 of the agreement. Since the beginning of the October ceasefire, the volume of aid has increased sharply. Let's take a look at the numbers. More than 33,000 trucks have entered Gaza since October 10, 2025. They delivered over 850,000 tons of food, 8,300 tons of medical supplies, more than 420,000 tents. Every week, more than 4,200 trucks enter Gaza. 12 field hospitals are operating today. Israel does not limit UN assistance and has invited agencies to increase daily deliveries. Israel has opened all major crossings into Gaza and earlier this week announced the reopening of the Rafah crossing. Aid is flowing, coordination continues. Mr. President, while attention remains fixed on Gaza, another crisis demands urgency. Iran. The Ayatollah regime is brutally repressing and murdering its own people. Behind 20 days of internet and telephone shutdowns and blackouts, civilians demanding freedom are executed, arrested, and silenced. Reports now indicate fatalities exceeding 30,000. That number should shock this council. Imagine for 1 minute a Middle East without this regime. Think about it for 1 minute. Billions of dollars would no longer be spent funding terror. Lebanon can regain its sovereignty finally from the claws of Iranian-backed Hezbollah. Syria could stop serving as an Iranian weapons corridor and move towards stability finally. Palestinians in Gaza and Judea and Samaria could focus on improving their lives instead of being trapped by armed radicals. The problem is not the people of the region. The problem is the regimes and militias that profit from chaos. Look at Yemen. Yemen offers another clear example of how the Iranian regime exports hate. The Houthis are not fighting over borders. They have no border with us. They have no border with the US. They have no border with most countries here. They are not fighting over land. The flag tells the entire story. Look at the flag of the Houthis. That's what it says in Arabic. Allah Akbar, Al-Maut li America, Al-Maut li Israel, Alana al-Yahud, Al-Nasr lil Islam. In English, God is great, death to America, death to Israel, curse on the Jews, victory to Islam. That is the official flag of the Houthis. This is radicalism. It is insanity. That hatred did not originate in Yemen. It was cultivated, funded, and armed by Tehran. The Iranian regime diverted its own people's money to fund terror instead of providing basic needs. This is how the Iranian regime operates. It builds networks of violence and exports them across the Middle East and beyond. A regime that massacres its own people cannot be trusted to respect others. The world's most extreme regime has never obtained the world's most dangerous weapon. Israel has no hostility toward the people of Iran. Their courage is undeniable. Their struggle for freedom deserves support. Their future must be free of tyranny. Hope, however, is not a strategy. As Hamas is dismantled, the Iranian regime must be confronted with the same seriousness. The same clarity must apply, the same standards must hold. Israel's position is unmistakable. Every hostage was brought home. Hamas must now be dismantled completely. Gaza must be demilitarized and de-radicalized. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Israel for this statement.